Everybody's experienced these at some point. I'm going to myth bust these 3 lies that most people tell themselves when they're trying to start their music journey, or even if they hit kind of plateau later on, a bit of uncertainty whether it's going to work out for you or not. Those 3 lies will come up and you'll tell yourself them. And often we just don't have the right information on like seeing the proof of concept that it is possible. And so I'm just going to run through those really quickly in a no BS approach on how to get over those like mental roadblocks that you might be experiencing. The first one is I need connections, or I need to be in a certain location to actually make it. I have been based in Perth, Australia for my entire life. I've never moved. I've never been outside of this city for longer than a week, honestly. And I managed to have a whole touring career off of just living in this location. And the way that I did it was just building leverage online. So you don't need to be in a certain location that will automatically get you more shows. If you move to another location on the hopes that that will change everything, you're going to be very disappointed, because there's so many stories I've heard and people who I know who have been in this boat where they move to another location where it's more popular, where there's more shows, there's more events, and they move over there for the industry, and then they realize nothing changed for them. Like they're in the exact same spot as they were before. Because if you don't have any leverage, there's no reason for somebody to book you in the first place. And if you're just moving from, playing local gigs in your current city, and there isn't many, and so you're moving to another city to get more local gigs, you're just still getting stuck in that same cycle of playing local shows. Because like local shows, they're fun, they're exciting, they're validating, it makes you feel seen, heard, and understood, and it's exhilarating, it's really fun. But it doesn't actually get you to a touring artist level, because you get stuck on that loop of fulfillment, because you're like, oh, well, I get to do that all over again next week. All I got to do is sell a bunch of tickets. And getting stuck in that place, like moving to another city, you're just going to be doing that all over again. Unless you have a promoter that is like putting you head first, where you're like co-headlining or direct support in front of like international artists, only then is it worthwhile. Like if you have that guarantee that that is actually going to happen, and it's very unlikely that any promoter is going to put you forward for no reason. Like there needs to be some kind of like strong rapport there, and you don't want it to be in a situation where you're having to sell tickets, because then you're going back to square one of being that local DJ that isn't respected for your craft. You're just there for them to make more money and monetize you. And you don't want to be in that situation, because you'll never get respected, and it'll become even more difficult for you to move up that ladder. I literally had to take a 1 year hiatus, or even 2, I think it was 2 years, where I took a step back from the industry so then I could take a step forward. So I stopped taking any shows locally. I didn't take any gigs for like a year and a half. And that allowed me to rebrand myself as like a touring artist. So like a complete refresher, and letting people forget that I existed, and then coming back with a vengeance. So I didn't have to do all that, promoter, selling tickets kind of stuff anymore. And that's how I transitioned from being that local producer and getting those bigger lineups. In terms of the connection side, you can build all of that online. I built all of that through email, and I've got clients where I have one client in particular, and he's based in Costa Rica, and he's recently, I think he's moved back there. But all the leverage that he built was from online. He didn't have to go and play any shows or do any local scene stuff. It was purely from online. If you have undeniable production and you get it to a high standard where the product itself is good, like sound design stands out, it's unique. It doesn't have to be technical. It's just as long as it stands out and it's unique, and your quality's there, and you've got the speed to keep busting out more tracks, you can be consistent, then the product itself is undeniable. And then only then should you start building leverage online, getting artist support, moving to mid-tier labels to high-tier labels, leveraging publishing deals to get like more revenue for the project, and then getting more shows from all those things combined. So I wouldn't worry about your local scene, honestly. You can get so much more traction nowadays, even better than what it was before. Because when I was doing it like 10 years ago, it was really hard, and the only thing I could do was run ads. Like that was the only thing I could do. And I got really creative with email strategy. And you might see that in some other videos on how I actually leverage email strategy to land things like label signings or management and booking agencies for myself and other clients, how we do that through email pitching, and how we get really creative with association, right? So you'll learn a lot about that through this channel if you're not familiar with what we do here. So just wanted to preface, again, you don't need connections, and you don't need to be based in a certain location to get your career going. Like you can start growing it from wherever you are. You could be based in Antarctica and it wouldn't matter. Like if anything, that would be more beneficial because you could make content about that, right? But you don't need to be in a certain location to get more shows. Like the opportunity will be there, sure, but you need to be in a position to actually get them in the first place. So don't bother making any of those drastic life changes or huge investments unless you know that something is actually going to be worthwhile doing, right? It's just like anything you do in life. Like you never rush head first into something unless you've done your research and you understand how it's actually going to be beneficial. Because like if you're going to another city just banking on hopium, it's not going to work out very well if you don't have an actual plan on how it's going to happen and you can see that process working. So the second lie that most producers tell themselves when they're hitting a plateau or they're stuck is that they're not good enough, that they're not talented enough. Anybody can get good at anything if you put enough time into it. Any skill set, unless you are born without limbs and that prevents you from doing a certain sport, pretty much any skill set, as long as you have, all your bodily functions, you can get good at anything. You really can, So this kind of skill set, it's just going to be a matter of, as long as you have a computer, you have a DAW, and you have the effort and you have the time that you're going to dedicate and you're going to sacrifice the things you don't actually need in your life, and you're going to put absolute focus on this, you can get really, really, really good at this. You can get better than anybody else that is in your circle. Because I guarantee you, most people in your circle are not sacrificing all that time to go towards this. When I was on the come up, from when I was 18, I basically had no social circle. And I did that by choice because the only thing that really fulfilled me in life was actually music. And so I wasn't going out on weekends. I didn't have a girlfriend for like 5-6 years because the only thing that was important to me for my fulfillment was building my music career. And so I just went all in. I was going Monday to Sunday, like nothing else but music production. So that's the kind of effort that you need to go all in on. Like, how much are you going to sacrifice to just do this? And that is what's actually going to beat talent. It's the dedication, the discipline. It beats talent. It's that getting so good that you are as good as what you say you are. Like, undeniably good. When you look yourself in the mirror, you know how good you are at this skill set. And so if you want to become the top 1%, you just have to treat yourself like an athlete. These guys that you're comparing yourself to on socials who are ahead of the game, who are headlining all these festivals, they treat themselves like they're athletes, right? That's how they treat their life and their work. Like, I remember, I think there was a live stream from Wooly many, many years ago when he used to do some live streams on like production. One of the things he said about in this live stream, like 8 years ago or something, was that he was working a 9 to 5, working his ass off, and then he'd get home from his 9 to 5 and immediately be working till like 3 a.m. and then he'd go back to work, sleep deprived, and he'd just do that over and over again. Because clearly how determined he was. And this guy went from a complete, intermediate kind of artist all the way to the top tier. Like, he's headlining like all the festivals and everything. And he was just like yourself. There are some artists that actually are savants, and that's like a very small percentage of artists in the world. Those are the people who actually are born differently and they have a certain skill set that just allows them to dedicate even more time and effort, and they can understand things a little bit more easier, especially when it comes to things like music. But that's like a very small majority of the entire planet who have that kind of like skill set in them. But for most of us who are at a touring level have just done it through putting in lots of hard work over many, many years. Like, it took me 10 years to get to where I wanted to be. And that might be the same thing for you. But you can get help outside of that. And if you get help from other people, you're gonna cut down that time. Instead of it taking you 10 years, you could get there in a few years. You could get there in like 2 or 3 years. The biggest mistake I made was that I never asked for help because I had too much pride in wanting to do things on my own. And you might see that in my story video that I posted recently about why I got to where I am and my rationale behind building music schools and how I became a touring artist, right? So that's just me. That's my regret, is I didn't ask for help and get help from people who were better than me so then I could speed up that process. The third lie that most producers tell themselves when they're hitting a hard point of their career is they'll get resentful to the other artists that are above them that have reached the levels that they think they should be at. Because you might have been doing it for a couple of years and you feel like you're not quite where you thought you would be at that point. And you start to resent other people, you get jealous, you make comparisons. And so I've been through that experience as well. When I was starting out, I kept doing that. And comparison is the worst thing to do because you're comparing yourself to a highlight reel. What people post on social media isn't what's actually truth of what they're going through. Because a lot of these artists that you might see are doing really, really well and they're playing all these shows. They're actually, a lot of them are doing really bad financially. They might be like struggling to actually make ends meet, where, a booking promoter might have messed them over and didn't pay them for the last bunch of shows or something. So like, never compare yourself to others on this journey because it will just make things worse. Instead, just focus on where you are now versus where you were before and where you're going. So if you keep tunnel vision focus on what your goals are and what you're trying to move towards, you're going to be incredibly successful. But in doing so, you have to keep reflecting on how far you've come. Because if you don't, you're going to be too hard on yourself and you're going to be demotivated by that. A lot of these artists that did get those opportunities that seem like they just got handed them, they just worked their ass off and they were just so consistent that they become undeniable. There's plenty of artists that are blowing up right now that have been doing it for like 10 plus years. Like another artist I can think of off the top of my head is Oddmob, who has been grinding for like 10 years. And he couldn't be any more deserving of the success he's getting right now, because this guy was grinding so hard for so long and he never gave up. The dude's just passionate about music. That's all he cares about. And you can see it in his brand, his socials, and his music. And like that's why he's where he is right now, because he never gave up. Despite the fact of having like such a small linear progression, it's only now that he's getting picked up. So the main takeaway I want you guys to have from this video is that you can do these things by yourself. Like it is possible to actually have that career. Usually we tell ourselves these lies when we've hit a point, like a plateau, where we're not progressing and we're not where we thought we would be at this point. So if we've been doing this for a couple of years and we feel like we're not progressing to where we should be, often we have this resentment, we have this jealousy, we have this self-doubt, we tell ourselves that we're not good enough, and we get detrimental to ourselves by having this perspective. And so you have to just remind yourself that it is possible, that the people that you're comparing yourself to, they've just worked really, really hard, and there's no unfair advantage that anybody's ever had. They've just always worked hard in their own right. Sure, there might be some people who maybe have paid their way by getting ghost production and whatnot, but there's no point in comparing yourself to that, because you don't want to be that person. You don't want to be somebody who like buys their way into becoming that kind of producer. They don't even make their own music. So how is that fulfilling to them? Obviously they're in it for the wrong reasons, and that's maybe their fulfillment. It's like, being seen and validated, and that's all they care about. But that's not why you do it. At least that's not what I hope why you do it. I'm sure you do it for a bunch of other reasons. Validation is important, but it's not the main sole reason why you do what you do. And so just remind yourself the next time you're going through a hard point that it is possible, you can do this, and it's just a matter of you putting in the hard work.